welcome everybody. You are in the right place for the Too Dirty to Wear webcast. We are so happy to have you here with us today. I'm Anne with Stand.earth. I'll be facilitating, and we have our speakers ready to talk with you. We have Kristina Flores, who is a climate campaigner with Stand.earth. Kristina leads our Filthy Fashion campaign and has expertise in nonviolent direct action, corporate campaigning, and community organizing. And before Stand.earth, they most recently worked with Greenpeace. Outside of Stand.earth, Kristina organizes with grassroots groups for justice and equity in the Black community. And welcome to Kristina. Thanks for being with us today. We have Kiersten Iwai, digital and climate campaigner with Stand.earth. Kiersten is an advocate, trainer, and community organizer with experience in local government sustainability, environmental organizing, and survivor advocacy. When not fighting structures of oppression, you can find Kiersten exploring mountains or dancing in the streets. And welcome, Kiersten. Glad to have you with us today. And we have Eoin Dubsky, campaign manager with SumOfUs. Eoin manages SumOfUs' European campaign teams. And before joining SumOfUs, Eoin worked at Greenpeace International in Amsterdam and was involved in peace movements and environmental groups in Ireland. And thank you so much, Eoin, for being with us today. I'm going to go ahead and close down this welcome slide and go ahead and set Kristina up to speak first.
Hi. Do I wait? Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you, and I'm just going to close down everyone else's videos, and so we can just hear you. Right on.
Hey everyone, I'm so excited to be able to chat with y'all. Thank you for the introduction, Anne. I don't need to read what I wrote about my introduction now. But again, I'm Kristina Flores. I've been with Stand for the last 2 years. And I wanted to start by giving you a brief background on the issues and why Stand wanted to engage in this particular issue. And I think there's two main reasons why we wanted to get involved. First, the magnitude of the issue. The fashion industry represents 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's significant. If it was a country, it would be ranked number 4 for the largest polluter in the world, just behind Russia. And one of the main reasons for this huge impact is because fashion production mainly happens in places like China and Southeast Asia, where the majority of the power grid is powered by coal. So we identified that clothes equal coal. And the second reason that we wanted to engage is that the fashion industry wasn't really doing anything to adequately tackle the issue, if anything at all. And before this campaign, no apparel company in the world had made a meaningful supply chain commitment when it comes to climate emissions, even though emissions from the supply chain represent upwards of 80% of the sector's footprint. And again, that is significant. And Stand, we identified that this problem can be solved through collaboration and investment in renewables, and collaboration in 2 areas: collaboration with nonprofits, other nonprofits wanting to address the fashion industry, hence our relationship with SumOfUs, and also collaboration with major brands who often use the same facilities for production. And Stan wanted to have a campaign that holds a really firm line that if a company is not setting targets to directly reduce emissions, then it's not doing what's necessary to address climate change. And unfortunately, a lot of fashion brands are only investing in carbon offsets or setting goals for carbon neutrality, which doesn't directly tackle the issue where it's happening. In addition, some companies are making reductions in their owned and operated facilities, but unfortunately, this only represents a fraction of a company's total carbon footprint. And Stan's campaign asks are in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. If our demands are met, then we'll be set on a course for radical emissions reductions. But most importantly, in an expedited time frame that matches the magnitude of the climate problem that we're seeing. And we're asking companies to do 4 things. First, we're asking them to make a 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2025 in their owned and operated facilities. This is scope 1 and 2 emissions. And this looks like putting solar panels on your buildings and increasing efficiency, which is totally doable. Again, that's that investment piece. The second thing that we're asking is for a 40% or higher absolute reduction in total greenhouse gas emissions also by 2025 in the full supply chain. That's the scope 3 emissions, the emissions that I talked about that happen in places like China and Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Turkey, India. Third thing that we're asking is a transition to renewable energy with a minimum of 50% renewable energy sourced through renewable energy by 2035. And we say this because reductions can be achieved through retrofitting and increasing efficiency, but this doesn't tackle the issue of moving away from coal power. And the fourth thing that we're asking of companies is a long-term carbon emission reduction of at least 66% by 2050 for the entire supply chain. And we know that this is possible, and Levi's demonstrated that last August when they committed to three out of four of the goals, which were all short-term goals. So that was our first huge campaign victory, which is really exciting, demonstrating that yes, this can happen. Yes, major companies can set these targets. Yeah, and that brings me to like, why did we even select Levi's? So beyond knowing that it was possible, and despite our peers all seeing Levi's as a sustainable brand and not really understanding why we would target a company that's already appears to be sustainable. We wanted to select Levi's as the first company to target based on the assessment that the company could be pressured into climate leadership relatively quickly. And we also wanted to challenge that sustainable image, because a lot of companies are attempting to paint themselves as sustainable, but they're not adequately addressing the climate issue. And compared to other brands, we know that it has a really strong ethic and social responsibility. And also its headquarters is in San Francisco, which is a progressive city, as most of us know. We also identified that Levi's senior employees in management could be pressure points. So we worked to appeal to their strong identification with Levi's company's values. And Levi's was a key element of our campaign plan. We had a strategy. What we wanted to do was build a high-profile public campaign with a really strong consumer component that targets top companies like Levi's to get them to make these ambitious climate commitments throughout their full supply chain and not just reach for climate neutral or carbon neutrality and do more. We believe that through leveraging an apparel company's market influence with the global company clothing manufacturers, particularly in China, that the industry demand for renewables could catalyze a transition out of coal to renewable energy, both in the power grids and at the factory level. And the goal of this campaign was exactly that, to use Levi's commitment to get other companies to meet or beat that commitment and make an impact on coal power grids in China and Southeast Asia. And beyond all that serious stuff, this campaign was a lot of fun. We had a really strong on-the-ground presence and a really compelling digital campaign. Our awesome digital campaigner, Kiersten, is going to talk a little bit about that, about what that looked like. But some of the really awesome elements of our on-the-ground presence was our presence at the headquarters. We had bus ads running around San Francisco for 4 weeks, spoofing Levi's and challenging their clean brand image. Actually, I'm going to stop and leave it there and kick it to Kiersten to talk a little bit more about the messaging and what that all looked like. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you a little bit.
Thanks, Kristina, and we'll tee up Kiersten now.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. Thank you, Kristina, for that introduction and overview. So I'm going to talk about the messaging and kind of some of the lessons that came through that. And honestly, I still think we're like moving forward that one. I think just audiences and what resonates them is constantly changing. But also, I feel like we haven't fully hit a really good angle. There's just so many juicy things with this fashion campaign. So also, if any of you have any suggestions on what you think messaging wise would resonate with the audiences that you work with, whether that's just your friends or family or colleagues or anything like that. So I'm going to touch on 3 different aspects. One is what I'm calling, for lack of a better term right now, the climate gap. The second one is more of this like hopeful optimist, and like how do you talk about a company that is relatively seen as good? And then thirdly, this kind of tension and contrast between talking about really serious things while also trying to remain positive, uplifting, and a little bit sassy and humorous. So I am just going to show some quick visuals to kind of help explain some of this. Cool. So way back when this campaign first started, and this was before Kristina and I were on board, the Stand team did some testing. And I will say that if I were to do this message testing now, I wouldn't follow the same methodology that they did. But just so you all know, if you're familiar, this was all just based on organic Facebook and Twitter posting roughly around the same time, and trying to figure out what type of framing works, whether that's toxics or water, climate, labor. I think those were the main categories. And probably no surprise to all of you, at this time, simple, uncomplicated messages worked really well, as did a water and a toxics angle. Again, probably not really a surprise to many people, and these were just some of the top organically performing posts, performing based on impressions and reach. And so then what didn't work? No surprise, these ones worked or did not work. The climate, like how much manufacturing a shirt or a pair of jeans amounts to climate-wise. These flopped, and you know, a little unfortunate because that's what this campaign is centered around, is around the climate impact of the fashion industry and reducing coal usage and consumption. But it just meant that we had to, one, make that connection even more and play around with what would actually work. So what we did come up with, I don't have an ad, so what works slightly better was kind of this cumulative impact. As you can see, these two graphics are just talking about generally for manufacturing one shirt is equivalent to one thing. We did found, as we eventually picked a target, Levi's, that looking at the bigger impact and targeting one company. So the amount of carbon pollution from Levi's is equivalent to 1.1 million cars on the road. That's a pretty staggering number. That's a number that more people can resonate with and kind of understand. So those performed better than these ones did, but I still wouldn't say they performed the best. So that's something we're still working through, is like, how do we really draw on this climate message? So what did work? Part of what really worked on this campaign is trying to be really hopeful and really making it real to people, even though we're talking about, you know, supply chain pollution in another country. It's pretty nuanced, pretty detailed, and something that most people think about with this out of sight, out of mind. And as Kristina alluded to, people is pretty loved, and some of our peers were like, what are you doing? It's Levi's. They're, you know, generally a pretty good leader in the sustainability world. And because of, but that's also why, right, they're a good target, because of the brand recognition and the attachment that consumers hold to these beloved, iconic brands. Our tone towards these companies and to consumers meant that, like, our message is even like more critical. And so right now it's pretty easy to blame Trump and get supporters all really fired up for whatever awful thing he's done, and get people to take action. It's not as easy to target somebody like Levi's. So again, we went with this more hopeful, we want something humorous. And it, you know, because this company is movable, and as Kristina mentioned, that's why we picked them. So I'm not going to play this video, but this is from our action on February 14th, Valentine's Day, outside the Levi's headquarters in San Francisco. You can find this video on our Facebook page. Essentially what it goes through is, you know, like a cute, nerdy guy, like getting all prepped up for a big date. And then it kind of shows him writing this letter, like this love letter to Levi's, saying that, like, you are amazing, but you are just too dirty to wear and need to clean up your pollution. And so the second half of the video shows our action. And here are just a couple pictures. My favorite, because who doesn't love adorable children actions, but also really demonstrates this hopeful, loving message that we're trying to portray, that like Levi's, you're not a bad guy. You're actually a really good company. Let's push you to be the leader that we know you can be because you are that amazing. So through that, we had gathered with some of us over 140,000 petition signatures, so made this huge card, and you can kind of see it on the bottom right photo. The girl is holding, it's a little pamphlet that was also like a very positive infographic that I will show shortly. And actually, I will show that now. So this is the infographic. So very like Valentine's Day, positive, again, not talking about the shaming, even though some of these issues are really serious that we talk about, like the air pollution and the real deadly impacts that it has. And so that's what brings me to my next point, in that there is this really awkward tension sometimes between strongly encouraging a target and using this humor and optimism and the very real climate impacts. And this is where our report, Too Deadly to Wear, comes in. We came out with this report in the spring that really showed that really connected Levi's and the climate and air pollution from Levi's factories and the amount of deaths that relates to from all these different climate impacts. We also created this, this is the bus ad that Kristina was talking about. Oh, that doesn't work. So Levi's is, your jeans are made with coal, and we spoofed off of the living in Levi's, so living in pollution, too dirty to wear, which is what our tagline for the whole campaign had been. And also culminated that in still using the same messaging. This came out, this was the same time as the report, but also an action in Times Square, like fashion capital of the United States. And this was also partnered with our kind of signature pants off dance offs that we had with these different actions of, your clothes are too dirty to wear. So a lot of our actions incorporated this idea of people with their pants off protesting. So again, like two really different messages and this really awkward tension, and what it required was just a lot of balance and compassion. That's one of the things at Stand that we like to lead with, is a lot of compassion, even for our targets in companies like Levi's. So yes, thank you very much. And now I believe Eoin will take it away. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Kiersten. And yes, we'll get Eoin teed up here.
Video. I think
Perfect.
it's working. Great. Thanks so much. That was fantastic, Kiersten. And like yourselves, I was only involved in part of the campaign. Some of us isn't that big an organization, but some people have come and gone, and some of my colleagues who worked on this campaign before me have moved on to other great organizations, including your own. Liz now works at Stand, and some other colleagues. So what I'd like to share with you. I'm going to share a little PowerPoint, just a couple of slides, and some of us, to talk about some of us's part in this, or what I know of it. My name is Eoin. I'm from Some of Us, and that's a global movement of consumers, investors, and workers all around the world, united together to hold corporations accountable for their actions and forge a new, sustainable, and just path for our global economy. I don't say that often, so I copied and pasted it from our website. There you go. There's people chatting. Don't forget to add questions. All right, yes, don't forget to add questions with Q&A tab. We welcome your questions. There you go. SumOfUs' timeline on this sort of in this campaign ended, I suppose, in August when we reported back to our members. We have members around the world, as I said, and we campaign in English, French, and German, a tiny bit in Spanish now too, and it was in August that we announced the great news, and it really was Stand campaigners, that did really the lion's share of the campaigning on this, and I want to really recognize that, and the amazing win, and so yeah, we shared it with our members so that they can share in the joy of that, and also have that collective joy. Climate is such, any rational person would freak out, every time they read about the climate crisis, and so it's really important to still have that collective joy. These moments where we're like, oh wow, it can. This is what we can do together, and give thanks also, this company really has shown leadership. They've really committed to showing leadership, and that can then inspire more leadership from others, that sort of meet or beat those targets. So then before that, there was that sort of update, and in January, earlier in the year, I'll take you through that. And then in December, you already heard that's when the campaign was really launched publicly, and we did an op-ed and some social media all throughout this time. And earlier in 2017, we also did some frames testing, so messaging testing for supply chain emissions campaigns, not only apparel. And I wasn't directly involved in that project, but I've been digging through in preparation for this call this evening. It's evening where I am, by the way. I'm in the Netherlands, to look through that and learn, tease out what I can from it. But I think, we've already heard this there's some of it's kind of obvious, so we don't have to go over it. So I have this, I copied this just little summary. I don't know how, we didn't do a go round. I don't know your backgrounds and what sort of information would be most interesting. So I'm really looking forward to the Q&A, actually, to hear what you're interested in most. And if I can't answer your questions to me about SumOfUs or from SumOfUs's end, I'll ask someone, a colleague, for the info and try and get back to you. But in terms of the online actions on our website, this, I don't know why it says that number. It should be 146, whatever. Anyway, 133,000 people sort of took action. And then, you can see sort of the, growth. So that means that people would take action, and then they'd tell more people. And if some of the people who they tell about this to come and take action have never taken action before and decide to take action with SumOfUs and opt in to take more action with SumOfUs, then that counts. That's kind of growth, and some of that is new members, and some of it is resubscribers, so people who maybe were members before and aren't at the moment, and this sort of sparks their interest again. There's that, and then there's unsubscribing from the mailing. So it can also really be quite a turn off for people, or the last straw. It could be that's it. I've had it with you. I love Levi's. Don't say those things about Levi's, or it could be anything else. You send too many emails. And so, I wanted to share this with you, just so you know, the net subscribers. It's this will happen when climate campaigns. We're a multi-issue campaigning organization, and the climate campaigns. And on supply chain emissions, this kind of stuff isn't going to grow the membership. It may deepen people's knowledge, and if we win, it may have an impact on the world, and that's why we're doing this work. But also, I just wanted to share that. I thought I would. So these are the real numbers from inside our database. And then there's some more statistics there. They're not that interesting, but that's sort of a reality. And luckily, because we're a multi-issue organization, we can balance that out. If we would only campaign on supply chain emissions, we would have to keep working on, for example, the messaging and so on, so that we could really figure out a way to really make it sustainable, I suppose, because otherwise, it's not sustainable. In the end, we'd just be talking to ourselves. But thankfully, this campaign really worked, and as I said, we do it for the impact. So this is what our petition looked like in English. And you can it's still live on our website. You can see it, but of course we've won the campaign now. And you see there's sort of check boxes down below the form, and that's because this is part of a larger campaign of the whole apparel industry. Also in December, when that was launched, our executive director Hannah Lansborough published an op-ed that was, wrote an op-ed, and that was pitched to an opinion piece to a couple of outlets. I saw it on Alternate when I just did a quick Google for it. I don't know where else it was published, but that's another thing that's, it's much longer than this. This is just the screenshot, and a lot of the sort of the opportunity to be able to have an op-ed to tease out some of the detail and contextualize the campaign it's a worthwhile tactic, I think, especially for a campaign like this. So I want to. This is kind of geeky, but I want to share it with you. So more geeky stuff. So in January, we sent this update. This is sort of what it looks like on your mobile phone. And you see on the left, and then on the right, that's not your mobile phone, but that's to do a screenshot. That's the way I did it. We have, so this is an email we sent to members who had signed. So it said, you signed our climate petition to Levi's just before the holidays. I wanted to thank you for that, and to update you about the campaign to make a climate leader out of Levi's. So again, it's that messaging we heard about Kiersten. It's really about saying, we want to make them a climate leader. This couldn't be more positive than that, really, demonstrating this is we believe this company can do it, and what this email then asks of our members who've already signed the petition is that can they now share? Sort of it informs them about the action at Levi's HQ at the headquarters there in San Francisco, and says, share it on Facebook. There was also another ask below, but this was the main one. And then when they would click on that link, if you'd click on the share on Facebook button, then if you do it on your desktop computer, it'll look like this, and you'll see you're sharing the petition, and you've got the sort of Live in Levi's tag already there, which of course Facebook on Facebook people don't tag as much as they do on Twitter, but it is something that that brands and brand managers keep an eye out for. So I wouldn't recommend using tags on Facebook for your normal online advocacy work or organizing, but it is good for causing mischief. If you want to, basically just if you don't want to be just working in the dark, and you want stuff to show up on their radar. Facebook is also it's Facebook, I'm sure it's a bit harder to monitor for brands. So it's great for sort of smoke and mirrors type of campaigns where they can't really tell how big things are. That's especially useful for brands who are who use Facebook for their own marketing, obviously. And so they care what people are saying there. So yeah, so this thing, by the way, just going back to it, so you see this image, and what it says is like, you know, pollution is killing us. That's sharing the petition. So this is sort of about messaging. What I want to share with you here, again, it's getting a bit geeky again, but even when we're pretty confident, yeah, okay, this is basically the frame we're using, and we're good here, we still will have a couple of versions of the Facebook shares and tweets and email shares also that members will be able to like click to share after they've signed a petition or taken another action on our website. And so the three examples you have here are, there's this, like one of them was, you know, Levi's, the secret is out, and the description, you know, do better and clean up your supply chain. Again, pretty positive with that iconic photo. The other one here you see in the middle is Levi's jeans are too dirty to wear. Find out why. So it's got that sort of teaser text. But the image is of, you know, the action. So like, you know, juxtaposed with that action, you're like, okay, there's obviously, it's obviously something, you know, that I can take action about, or that's what's implied. And then finally there's pollution is killing us, and Levi's is partially to blame. We don't want to pin it all on them. And then, yeah, I want to show you here on the table on the left, the version number 1 is the top one. That's like performed kind of meh. The second version, actually, so there's Levi's jeans are too dirty to wear and find out why, with the action photo. That's the one that that's really performed better, you know, out of the three. This is a testing system that we use that like will constantly be testing, but it's most likely to keep sharing the second version, like the activist version, because it's really performed better than the other two. And the third one, the one that you saw from the screenshot just before, the one sort of, you know, pollution is killing us and Levi's is partially to blame, that really doesn't perform so well. So our system will like really only like show it from time to time and sort of see like, is this working for people? No, it's still not. Okay, yeah, don't show it again for a while. So that is just a little a look behind the curtain. I wanted to share that with you, or under the hood, and it really sort of confirms the well, what you've heard already before, you know, about positive messaging. The positive messaging doesn't mean, of course, like that then you can't have a radical ask. Something that's really attractive about this campaign to me as a climate activist, and to some of us as an organization, is that, yeah, like Stand, you know, really, you know, those 4 asks are really in line with the Paris Accord. They're really like serious asks, you know. So it's not that, like, I don't know if you have had this experience before, but like where you're speaking with people about like, oh, like, you know, what if we use this framing, you know, which is positive, and they're like, oh, but you know, we're radical. It's like, yeah, your ask can be radical, right? You know, but that doesn't mean that you have, yeah, that you can't you know, use you know, test messaging, which really may resonate better. And then finally, oh wait, is this, no, this isn't final. Yeah, so this is like in February, sort of that action, and the Valentine's Day action. We encouraged members who, you know, to carry on taking more action, and so to go on to the Facebook page of Levi's. And we did this in English and in French. And yeah, some members, they love doing this. They love, again, like, it's great for mischief. And those who don't, like, that's fine. But some people really love being able to take action online, and also, especially like if it's something related to something someone is doing offline, that's a great feeling too. yeah, and then as I mentioned in August, we reported back to our members. We included this, so this is sort of what the email text looked like in English, and it really speaks about our members. So it says, you scored a major victory, and that sort of member-centered language, and it's also like corporate focused and sort of, so we talk about the climate crisis and we talk about greenhouse gas emissions and that, but also like make sure we're talking about the corporation and corporations and their responsibilities. We also name other corporations, Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. So that's sort of a shot across the bow there, and we've got the this image that people can share on social media. And finally, we also finish up with, well, actually at the end with a link to a news story, but before that also a fundraising asking if people who've read all the way down to there can also make a $3 contribution for our climate campaigns. And then finally, this is the French version of the share image. So again, we asked members, to share in the joy with us. I'll stop sharing that. Yeah, like winning on climate. These wins are so few and far between, and there's so much greenwash out there that it's really hard to be kind of like, oh wait, is this just greenwash? Like this isn't, you have to kind of check yourself. But this doesn't feel like greenwash. We have to hold them to their commitments. Set it in your calendars, 2025. But seriously, it's like that really does make a difference. And I think everyone at Stand who was involved in this, and even those who aren't in Stand anymore and aren't in SumOfUs anymore, I hope they really feel that they've made a difference with this campaign. I played a small part in it, and it was fun. Yeah, even though I didn't get to do the stripping off, dancing around part. I'd love to hear the questions and comments or thoughts. I'm happy to share sort of learnings, like what went wrong or whatever. I am really happy to answer whatever questions I can, and love to hear what others think. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you, Eoin. We are heading into Q&A shortly, and we've got some questions in the Q&A tab, and I'm excited about those, and I want to encourage other people to add your questions there. That helps me arrange them and get to more questions and hopefully bring some people in so we can see and hear you. I'm going to bring Kristina back now to talk about lessons learned. Eoin set them up well for that. Talk about lessons learned and what's next for the campaign, and then we'll move into Q&A.
Hi, I'm back.
Hey!
So I am going to wrap us up fairly quickly here so we can get us to the Q&A section. I want to make sure we have plenty of time. In addition to what Anne mentioned, I'm also going to talk a little bit about what the win means. As I mentioned earlier, the Levi's win means it is possible to make these commitments. And as Eoin said, we're definitely going to have to hold them to that in 2025. So that's when we'll really know if the fruit of our labor, however that statement goes, if it works out. Reap what we sow type stuff. But I think this is actually just the beginning of some real authentic change in the fashion industry. As a part of the Too Dirty to Wear campaign, we communicate directly with some of the world's largest brands about their climate commitments. And during the course of our communications at the end of last year, it was really clear that companies are taking sustainability seriously, and they do understand the urgency of the matter. I just think that many companies really need coaching so they can make appropriate commitments, but also they need to have their feet held to the fire. non-violently, of course. But more apparel brands are joining the Science-Based Target Initiative to help address climate pollution, like Nike and like Chanel. And beyond that, we're seeing some signals of industry collaboration, with the fashion charter being announced last year at COP24. And the Inside Scoop tells us that we should be anticipating many more announcements this year that are in line with Levi's. So fingers crossed that that's what we'll be seeing this year, and that in 2025 we can see the fruits of that labor. And yeah, so I now transition into a little bit of lessons learned. I think looking back at this campaign, I remember that there was a lot of chaos, but I think that when you're operating in moments of chaos, you kind of just compartmentalize it and forget it. So some of it's kind of like a lessons blur. And a lot of it, I think, is just I don't think they're like new lessons, but they're good reminders as campaigners, as you're moving through campaigns like this, public-facing campaigns. And I highlighted 3. I think I'm a comedian, so hopefully you'll laugh too. But an easy target ain't so easy is my first lesson, because we saw Levi's as low-hanging fruit. Like, yeah, they're so sustainable, they're so cool. Of course, they're just gonna commit. We'll talk to them and they'll commit. And then that was simply not the case. Communication broke down pretty quickly once we, it broke down pretty quickly. And then we protested with our first Pants Off Dance Off in front of one of their stores. And they were not pleased. And they stonewalled us, essentially, throughout the campaign. So I think that was something that is always a possibility. But as campaigners, we can get a little blind. We didn't see that as a possibility. I think we're always prepped for the possibility, but didn't anticipate it with this target. And so it was a good reminder that, yeah, hey, even when you think it's easy, it might not be. The second lesson learned is taking your pants off makes you hard to ignore. I think that's a life lesson that we all know. This proved to be really clear when we went to the Times Square location. Kiersten showed a picture of that earlier and mentioned it as a pants off dance off. But if you look at the picture, people have their pants on, and one of the people has boxers on, but like leggings underneath. It's really hard to get people to take their pants off when it's cold. Just in case you're trying to do a pants off protest, warm weather makes it easier. But yeah, when you take your pants off, it makes you hard to ignore. We just let media know in New York that this was going to happen, and that was enough to bring Fox News out and to have them mention us. There was no protesters to end up taking like good video and photo of with their pants off because of the cold weather. But just because we had said that we're taking our pants off in Times Square because Levi's is too dirty to wear, Levi's had to respond to us in the media, even though they wanted to stonewall us. And so that was a great lesson. We know that if we take our pants off, you can't ignore us. Third lesson is sometimes you're going to gear all the way up to escalate and then you win. It's a bittersweet moment because all of that work and labor and excitement and can be derailed because you won. And that's okay. But our like moment of escalation in this campaign was last year on National Underwear Day. I'm sure all of you know exactly what day that is. It's in August. And we were planning to break a world record, the Guinness World Record for most people gathered in their underwear. And this was an ode to Levi's for being too dirty to wear. And as we found venues, shuffled money around, made flyers, went to events and shared our coming event, a few days before our event, Levi's made their announcement, which we know is strategic. We know they were watching us. And so it was really satisfying to see that our campaign was noticed, that even though they were stonewalling us, they were seeing us, they were feeling us, and that they moved in response to our actions. So yeah, those are the 3 lessons that stuck out for me. There are many more lessons, many more lessons. But I'll leave it at that. And then what's next for the campaign? and then we'll get into questions. But what's next for the fashion campaign? First off, a moment to celebrate. We just got a grant from Talia Fund, and this is really going to propel our work forward into the next year. So this is a really exciting moment for the campaign. And right now we're in the process of wrapping up a report card grading the brands and retailers who are members of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. There are over 100 brands and retailers who are working in this collaborative manner to address sustainability and climate change. But through review, we're seeing that joining the SAC, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, in many cases is the work that they're doing. So being a member is kind of like their badge of honor. So we're digging in to suss out the greenwashing, and I anticipate that we're going to see some much stronger commitments coming out on the other side. I think it's going to be a real eye-opener for both consumers and brands to see how they're really measuring up to our demands and the Paris Climate Agreement. And beyond this, we're going to be expanding our collaboration in regions beyond China into Turkey and Vietnam, and working to make some strong collaborative efforts with other nonprofits. So that way we can really scale up the work and the impact, because there's many angles to tackle climate pollution and the fashion industry. And so I think that this next year is going to be a really exciting moment for the fashion campaign. And yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I have for you. I'm going to stop there so that way we can jump into questions with our last few minutes of time. I want to say thank you so much to everyone, and I'm excited to see your questions. Check.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristina. Okay, this is Anne. I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to help everybody pull up their videos, and we're also going to bring up Macy, who has put some questions in the Q&A. So let me get all of our presenters back on video here. I will come in too, and take just a second, and we'll bring in, and while we get Macy settled, I have a couple questions that I want to ask. I just want to dig into a little more to things that our panelists talked about. Just a little bit about the targeting and the messaging. I was reminded as you were talking that that the message is in part shaped, of course, by who the target is, and this line that you all were trying to walk about kind of the right amount of humor, the right amount of a hard message, because it's really serious, the impacts of this energy use. And then also the lightness, because this is a beloved brand and one that has done some good things, and you just wanted to push them to do more. I just wanted to have you all dig into that a little bit more. And if there are any even specific conversations that you can recall where you were trying to get this right balance, anything that you want to share on that.
Yeah, I can kick that off. So right when we first launched the campaign specifically around Levi's, we knew that, it's a well-liked brand, but I don't think we fully realized the extent of how its Levi's employees are really tied to the company, which is different than you see in other companies, in other corporate campaigns. And so this was realized when we did the first action at the headquarters, where employees were going through and really confused. I'm like, why are you targeting us? We're awesome. We live in San Francisco. We probably drive Priuses and all of those things. And they were just really confused. And, when you get confused and feel like you're being attacked, you get really defensive. And so that right there, I think, was one of the really big moments when we were debriefing on oh, wow, employees can be really key, and they've been really powerful in other corporate campaigns that we worked on. So how can we shift our message, shift our actions to be really supportive, so that employees who really want to do the right thing and do good push their own company? And so that's really where this compassionate tone, you start to see the shift from our very first action that was a lot more serious. I think they were in face masks, and we added a 2 next to the Levi Strauss & Company, the CO, we added a 2 to it. So I shifted from that to the Valentine's Day action that we showed you, which was a lot more of a message of love. Kristina, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I started thinking and then I was like, oh, listen, and then I lost my thought. I definitely had something I wanted to add to that, but it slipped away from me. So I'm going to pass it and see if Owen has something to add, and maybe it'll come back to me.
Do you know what? Jump in if you can remember it. I can share one from, not from this campaign, but I think it's like a parallel to this, or there's some parallels. When I was in Greenpeace and we started targeting Apple for their toxics in their so PVC and brominated flame retardants and things like that. When we started that campaign, like, this is basically like, this conversation happens in any activist organization, right? Where people are like, let's go after them. Look at how bad it is, because we have all that impact stuff. We put it in a report. We say, yes, but people love this brand. Also, people who work in this corporation love this brand, and there's all that love. And you can decide, you can be like, okay, like, should we aim to at best not shift these people over to here where they become a problem, if you think of it sort of like in terms of power, like that you don't like want to antagonize them and they get defensive and then suddenly they're against you, and they weren't before. They were driving in their Prius thinking of nice things about your cause. They feel that they're part of the same cause, and suddenly you've antagonized them. Obviously you want to avoid that, but is there even a way that you can sort of capitalize or use, leverage their basically chauvinism, and that is, I think, that's what you have to do for these campaigns, like where people really love the brand, I think that Greenpeace did that successfully on Apple. I think that, like Stand and, some of us helped, do that also on this campaign. And I really encourage people. That's not like, there's loads of brands where people do not, like, no one loves Amazon, for example. No one who works there loves it. No one like Jeff Bezos doesn't even love it, So I wouldn't try it on Amazon. But I think in every product category you're going to find, there's an Apple, there's a Levi's, there's a company with a story like that. And like, at best, don't antagonize, like, don't create a new constituency of people who you're going to have to fight, but do even have forgive me if I know I'm like lecturing on how to do this, and we didn't do a go around. For all I know, like, you're doing this already, forgive me, but my learning from that experience was, like, it's ideally try and leverage that love that they have for the brand, because they really want to work for a company that's like cool, and doing good things,
I remembered.
Awesome.
I wanted to answer your question, Anne, about how we towed the line between the seriousness of the campaign and the levity we had to bring because of the and I think the way that we towed that line was in the online space. If you guys can hear that background noise, forgive me. Basically in our online space, really showing the depths of, like, how bad the problem is so that, the surface of the campaign is really fun and inviting, but if you want to know more, you can access that deeper level of information, so that way we can demonstrate, like, hey, we're out here for a really good reason. And we did that with the report card, and we did that with several different images that we tested on Facebook and social media. So that way we could, show who's actually impacted and what this looks like, on that very serious level.
Yeah, because it's interesting. You all got into things in the report and in some of the other online spaces that are as serious as those things that, Kiersten, you showed that didn't work so well in the messaging. Like, you got to that level of talking about the impacts, but it's interesting that you realized that you needed a different gateway in, a different way to bring people in, and then they could get, as Kristina, as you're saying, as deep as they wanted, as intense as they wanted. Does that sound right? Okay. Kristina's muting due to background noise, I think. Backyard noise. All right, we have one member from our audience who is going to ask a question, and Macy, let me see if I can unmute you. Yeah, we should be able to hear you, and thank you for your questions.
Great, yes, of course. Thank you very much for hosting this podcast. Or webinar, it's been really helpful. I'm just curious, so I actually work with Green Century Capital Management, and we do socially responsible investment. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more of how y'all would consider a way that investors could get involved in this campaign. And then I was also curious to hear a little bit more. I saw that you guys had initially tested all of the messaging around water and toxins, and it was really helpful. And there was like quite a lot of interest in that. I'm curious what led to this switch to focusing instead on climate within the supply chain.
I'll address that second question and then pass it on to Kristina. I don't know why they tested the water and the toxins. I think just out of curiosity, because really this campaign grew out of reducing coal usage. And so the original testing was between apparel, electronics, and there was a third one. And apparel seemed the best fit, just looking at the landscape on what our other groups working on, as well as like what is resonating with our supporter list, which at the time was relatively small, and we've definitely have grown since then. So I think the water and toxics angles are great entry points, I think, to get people introduced to the idea to just talk about fashion is an issue from all of these angles, draw them in along the supporter journey into climate. On the investor thing, Kristina, I'll have you kick that off, but I will say with Levi's is a private company, so therefore there's no any sort of shareholder angle for that, which also made it a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think if I'm right, they actually just went public. So after we were finished with our campaign, they went public. So next campaign should be a little easier. We can get into the AGM. But from the investor angle, so as a part of our report card, one of the things we're doing is we're giving bonus points if you have supplier invest incentive programs. Essentially, factories don't have the money to, quote, don't have the money to make the transition to renewables. So we want to see companies say, okay, X amount of my production happens here. I will offer X, Y, and Z grant to make the retrofitting possible that needs to happen to make immediate savings for the factory owners, and then also have programs so that people can install renewable energy. So, I mean, just there is just the direct investment into the manufacturers and having them make these changes at their own factories. I don't know if, Owen, if you have some stuff you wanted to add. I hope that helps answer your question.
It does, yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're muted, Anne.
I am muted. Thank you for telling me. We have another person who has a question. I'm not sure they are wanting to be on camera. I'll give them one more moment to answer that. In the meantime, we have an anonymous question. It says, you said that that Levi's only agreed to three of four asks, if they're remembering right. If that is right, why did the campaign on Levi's stop?
They didn't, the last commitment that they didn't make was a long-term commitment. And I think the reason why it was like, we're done here, the thing is we're not done here, right? But the public facing part of the campaign is like, we're done. Because I think the way that as campaigners we would look being like, you did all of these great things, but there's one thing you didn't do, is that longer term goal anyways. So that goal brings us into, I believe, 2050. And so there's time to work out what those longer term goals look like, really. Yeah, I think that was the decision, and like no longer public facing. And it's like, their commitment is really strong. despite not having that last piece that we would like to see. So we know that we could take this and use this as leverage for other companies, and also other companies can, beat Levi's by taking on that fourth commitment. It's like, Levi's didn't do this last piece. Are you going to be the one? Yeah.
Nice. Terrific. Does anyone else want to jump in on, add anything to that? Okay, great. I'm going to ask this other question on this person's behalf. And in a weird twist, I think I might have the easiest time answering it. This is a person who works on cleaning the earth, water, air, environment for from a vegan anti-cruelty standpoint. And do you ever target huge food corporations? If you are not already in our campaigners network, let's get you in there so you can connect with some people who are targeting food corporations. So I'll follow up with you after the webcast. But if any of our panelists have anything you want to add, if there's anything that SumOfUs is working on right now, I don't think we have anything at Stand that is particularly food related right now. And how about Eoin? Is there anything at SumOfUs right now that's particularly targeting large food corporations? And if so, we could just help you all connect after the webcast.
There is. Let's connect after the webcast.
Okay, great. I will follow up with this person and get us connected. And awesome. And it looks like we have another question coming through. Oh, okay. And that was just the person saying they did not want to be on the camera. So, but I see you, and we'll get everyone connected after. And I have one more question that I have, and I'll leave space if one more comes in the Q&A tab. I think we have time for my question and one more after that before we wrap up for the day. And there was something, Eoin, that you noted that I wanted to circle back to about how you know that your supporters, when they were making the mischief, they liked to know that their online mischief was connected to offline. I mean, that their online, was connected to offline action, and that that was really important in the campaign. And I just wanted to have you talk about that a little bit, and then also have Kiersten and Kristina weigh in if they felt that on the Stand side too.
Yeah. So if you're asking me how do you know? So like on not just this campaign, but like other campaigns we do when there are some people who will be really into a topic, and you say like, here's something you can do to help push this further or forward, and they'll just do it. So they don't need any more convincing, any more persuading. Our responsibility is just to like try to create the opportunities for them, and time them and so on. But then there's all these other people who like, cared enough about the thing to, take the initial action. They live in the real world, right? Now, like in terms of like what data do we have? We see that, so when we send emails to ask people to take an online action, and we say that there is an offline sort of component to it, that really does help. Like we see a difference in the numbers. So for like an example, a typical example at SumOfUs, because we do a lot of petitioning, is that after we've sent a petition email out already before, and then we're sending out what we call a kicker. So just an email sort of saying like, hey, there's this thing, you haven't done it? Please do it. And we A/B test quite a lot. And so like one version that says, for example, like we've done, testing on this, X number of people have already signed this petition, help us get to Y number. That's like, okay, some people like that. Because they like round numbers. But saying, testing that against, like this petition like we're going into a meeting, you know, like people are going to go do a thing with this. Like the action you're taking online has this, you know, is connected directly to something happening offline, or that's going to happen offline. That always outperforms the other one. And I don't mean like a poorly written one in a well, like a you know, really, you know, if we do our best to write to try to motivate people, and where it'll be online only, that's always a bit harder it'll be hard to get that to perform better than something written equally well, but which has an offline hook, which has something offline to it. So that's my experience at SumOfUs, but it was also at Greenpeace. Because of course people live in the real world. You know, they live online too. They have online lives, but they also have normal, real world lives.
Terrific. Kiersten or Kristina, anything you want to add on that?
I will just quickly add, a lot of it too is just about building a community. People like to know that they're, you know, you're part of something that's bigger than yourself, and also have a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out. And you're like, oh no, I don't live in San Francisco, I can't attend the action. But, you know, so providing another way for them to be involved.
Great. And maybe even, did you even in this campaign kind of word it that way? Like not in San Francisco, or not in DC, or, you know, not in New York, can't get to Times Square. Is that language that that you found was helpful?
I don't remember. I'm sure that's something that we've mentioned, but I think part of it is telling the broader story.
Yeah.
Too.
Okay, great. Kristina, did you want to add anything on that?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. We have one more question, and I forgot to ask this person if they want to come online. So for apologies that I didn't ask you, I'm going to go ahead and ask the question on your behalf so we can get it in. And also, I just want to say, then I'll give all of our panelists a minute to make a closing remark, and we'll have some last thank yous. So here's the question. The Bangladesh Fire and Safety Accord is under attack at this time. It was set up to try to change the fashion industry after the Rana Plaza disaster. How can you trust that any commitment will be kept?
I can answer that. I don't think trust is built in any situation, and seeing what Levi's has done as far as, you know, tackling water, they do good work, and their work is like, we can see it. So I think trust will come after 2025, because, you know, these commitments are great and we are excited to see them, but we know just as easily as a commitment is made, it can be broken. And so trust is saved for the actions part.
I will also quickly add, I think we really saw this with our Starbucks campaign, our campaign to really push Starbucks and the cup and paper cup industry to have better sourcing of the pulp that their cups make. And Starbucks had made this commitment that, you know, they would do good, have a recyclable cup, all of these things like quite a few years ago. I'm not sure the exact year, but that was a while. And we're like, great, that's awesome. And then they never did anything with that. Like we never saw any of the results from that commitment. And so we campaigned against them again to be like, hey, Starbucks, you made this commitment. Why aren't you doing it? And that eventually did lead to a successful campaign where Starbucks was like, yeah, we're actually going to do it this time. And this is how we're going to show that. And so then even though public facing that campaign is no longer as big, and now we're targeting other companies, behind the scenes, there's a lot of that background work and follow up to make sure that the company is actually doing that. Because in the end, yeah, it is hard to trust the companies.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of to add to that is that the depending on the where you are in the world, I suppose, what the you know, trying to get sort of federal law changed in the United States at the moment, right now on this for more corporate accountability. It's probably not it's going to be a heavy lift, but that's another avenue to also pursue. Like, you know, only trust the corporations as far as you can throw them. You have to, keep at them, keep watch on them always, but also pursue them through trying to get progressive laws passed. And quite often, like for example, the single-use plastics directive here in the European Union, which some of us members helped campaign for, it's only the European Union, but it's still quite sort of agenda setting for other places in the world. And I think that that is it affects basically every corporation which ever makes any plastic packaging or anything like that. So I think that there's just on this, for example, on fashion industry, we have a campaign. Some of us has a campaign in the UK calling on the Under Secretary of State for the Environment to set mandatory environmental targets for fashion retailers with a turnover of big companies, basically. And that is sort of an example, like right now with this particular government, that's very unlikely, but there may be a general election quite soon in the UK, and under a different government, perhaps that sort of legislation is much more likely under a Labour government, for example, a Corbyn government, and that sort of thing is also. If there were a law like that in Britain, corporations, of course, if they were forced to in Britain set mandatory environmental targets, that'll have an effect around the world, or far beyond Britain.
Great. I want to give all of our panelists a chance to make a closing remark. I also want to just thank you all again for being here, and thank our audience, and also thank Liz McDowell with us at Stand.earth right now, and has been at SumOfUs before, worked on this campaign in both places, and has done a lot of work in behind the scenes for this webcast and this campaign. And so with that, who would like to lead off on closing thoughts? Who's got the first thought? Kristina.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the thanks for coming and joining this space. It was really nice to be able to share about the campaign. The win is a little behind us now, and so it's a good refresher for us to, get moving into the next part of this campaign. I think oftentimes we rush into the next part and don't take a moment to meditate on what's happened and what we've done. And this space has definitely provided that moment to really, reflect on what has happened, and then be reminded of the excitement around this campaign. Check. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Kristina.
And I'll follow up with just, again, thank you for coming. It's always really fun also to just look back and see how far we've come and the lessons learned as we move forward with this campaign and pick a new target and do the scorecard. And I'll put a plug that Kristina and I are piloting the Filthy Fashionista show on Facebook Live, so you can learn about all things about sustainable and fast fashion and how you can be a better fashionista and consumer. So putting that in a plug. Check.
Right on.
I'll jump in I'd like to thank you all too. This has been super. Thank you very much, Stand, for organizing this. And I think there was an article I was reading the other day. This kind of reminds me of it, like these corporations and for that matter, our governments, they measure growth in terms of like GDP, but we know that's like a nonsense metric to use. It's a very unhelpful one. And I think that what I like about this campaign, I think about campaigns like this, is that we're saying like we're not trying to hold the company back. What we're seeking is leadership. Like we're asking them actually to speed up. So like in a way it's kind of growth, but it's just like measuring it in a way that's actually is compatible with nature, and like it's and society and stuff like that, so that's something that I really love about this campaign, and this was a pleasure to be able to look over my notes again, and yeah, I'd love to meet you all, and yeah, please do share my contact details, and I'd love to connect with whoever it was who had that question. Thanks.
Terrific. Yes, thank you all so much. I will follow up about that one question. Also, Tim, if I saw your question, and I'll get more information to you about that. And everybody who requested it will get a copy or get a link, an email with the link to the recording and how to plug into some additional things that are going on. And we look forward to getting you that. If you think you didn't request that when you registered, just send me an email. Just reply to the email you got with your information for joining, and I'll get that, and I'll be able to make sure you get that email. Thank you all for being here, for your support of the campaign, and thank you so much to our speakers for all of your great work.